Okay, next up we have Wesley from the Confluence development team. Before I get Wes up here, just a quick question. How many of you in the audience are using Confluence 4 or above? Okay, and if you've used autocomplete, auto-convert, those features, this is the man responsible for them. So Wes, I'll invite you up to the stage now.
Thanks, Matt. So, hello. This is connecting cross-functional teams during product development with Confluence. Someone saw that on the schedule earlier and made fun of me a little bit and said I should fit a couple more buzzwords in. But there it is. So yeah, I'm Wes. I'm a front-end JavaScript developer at Atlassian. So what that kind of means, if you want to, is you can blame me for the editor. You can thank me for the editor if you want. Either way, works for me. Just a little bit about me. That's a picture of me panning. Oh, that's a picture of me panning for gold when I was very young. I was probably somewhere in Virginia. I have on a cowboy hat. And I didn't think that that was a theme in my life until I noticed that most of my other photos on Facebook have me with a hat on. That's me. What am I doing? I'm antiquing, and I don't think I get it. There's another picture with a hat on. I play some sports. There are very few pictures of that fact. I'm from North Carolina. I grew up there. I went to school in the mountains where it's absolutely amazing in the summer, and you go to school in the winter when it's freezing and awful. And now I live in Sydney and work at the Atlassian office there, and that's the obligatory shot of the Opera House that we have to show all of you guys. So what we're going to be talking about today is product development, and in particular the process to get from ideation through execution all the way to shipping a product. And I think that that's a shared story that almost everyone here at Summit shares. So I'm going to talk about our version of that story and how we think that we're leveraging Confluence, the tool, to make that process better and to make ourselves more effective in that process. So this is a quote from the guy who designed the lunar lander. And so part of this story is about how you capture things that at the beginning you don't really have pictures of. You have a vision, but you don't really have pictures to show your team. You have these ideas, and they're great and wonderful, and how do you get those through and make them concrete and get them in front of real customers and make them effective for those people as well. So if you've been to our website, we have a version of that story. It's got a nice little road and it's pretty, and we tell you where we use each of our products along that. But the basic sort of principle of it is dream it, plan it, build it, launch it. And so, like I said, that's from ideation all the way to launch. And I'm going to talk about, in particular, I'm going to dive into some areas and show what those look like inside of Atlassian for each of those phases. So the places where we really leverage Confluence strongly are going to be emphasized a little more than others. So naturally, build it is very code intensive. So I'm not going to dive into that because coding doesn't happen in Confluence. Coding happens in an IDE. A lot of design happens in Photoshop, but we leverage Confluence really well in that area and do a lot of collaboration. And I'm going to use Confluence 4.2 and some screenshots from that and some of our pages that came out of that, some of the artifacts of that process as the means of talking about this. Now at Atlassian, we have a really great reputation, I think, in the industry of being a great software dev shop. And if we were to make commercials, we would have like really great looking visuals for our stuff. Kind of like McDonald's or Burger King, right? Like they have great shots of burgers. But I want you guys to get a look behind the curtain and see what does product development at Atlassian really look like. So here's a shot of the marketing version and the real version of a burger. And we're going to talk about that at Atlassian today. So what does product development really look like, with an emphasis on the 4.2 as a case study, and at the end we'll have a couple of minutes for Q&A. So the first step in that whole process was getting it down. At Atlassian, we've learned really quickly that new is a constant. that things are constantly changing, that people are always having new great ideas, that everyone's trying to push something new, and there's always either a new way to do things or a new thing to do. There are new visions for the product, and how do you walk that path? How do you constantly come up against those new things and get them down effectively, record them and make them approachable in the future, but also how do you keep people motivated and keep saying, oh, well, your new idea really is great and really is strong, so we should get it in. And how do you move on the current new ideas, and are those stronger than the previous, what was the new idea last month? So the places that new sort of comes from. We have customers. We have an open Jira instance that you guys are always using to give us new ideas, and we really love that. We've constantly got upvotes. What Jira ticket has the most upvotes, and of course we're always in the blogosphere looking around trying to figure out what people are talking about, what people are saying are the pain points in our products, whether it's Hacker News or just true blogs or Twitter. What are people complaining about, or what are they saying that they want to see? And we're trying to leverage that information. And then we've got product managers, really awesome guys who are casting vision for the future of our products. We've got a pair of amazing founders who are really opinionated about what tools and software devs should expose to users and how they should make users more effective. Just like any other software shop, we're constantly doing competitive analysis, and sometimes it's not even competitive analysis. Sometimes it's other tool chains for different types of software. So obviously, we're looking at places that people collaborate in their lives, like Facebook or Google+, and we're looking at what they're doing really well. We're looking at some of our competitors to see where we think they might have an edge on us, where they're seeing their customers succeed. And we're trying to leverage those ideas and bring them into our own products and make our customers awesome. And the thing that we found is that you can't stress over getting every new thing down, because people are really good at pushing new ideas. People are really good at pushing their own ideas. But in particular, other people will come alongside them and help them push the idea if it's good. And that's sort of given the right culture. I think we've really nailed that at Atlassian. And I think that sort of comes along through strong leadership and strong example setting among leaders in the organization. So Confluence, hopefully, and for us we've found, really helps us in that process. Things like shares, mentions, likes, and popular content. The current popular content feed is probably my most used thing inside of our internal Confluence instance, just because I can log on any given day and see what the new, latest, and greatest stuff that's being discussed is. And it's always going to keep me up to date about I can go into Confluence and know with pretty good accuracy what the conversation is going to be about today at lunch, right? So that keeps me up to date. It sort of replaces the water cooler. And when I say that we don't stress, one thing that comes out of that is that we don't keep a lot of lists. There aren't a lot of lists of here are the 200 features that people have come up with in the last 6 months that are really great, because Confluence is keeping all that information sort of archived for us. All those things we can get back to later if we remember, oh, we were thinking about doing likes 6 months ago and it dropped off the list, but I think it's actually really strong, so let's just do a search real quick and find out who did a spike on that, if there's any code laying around for that, and bring it back up to the top and work on it some more. So this is a shot of popular content in our internal instance. Obviously, we use mentions a lot, so mentions are really great for me, because if someone mentions me, I can immediately get an email that shows me the context in which I mentioned, and that helps me know if this is something that's actionable that I need to follow up on immediately, or if it's something that I can archive and it's just a friendly mention like, oh, thanks Wes for doing this. That's like, I appreciate that. It's good, I can move on now. But if it's something, Wes, how does this work? It's something I need to action immediately. And then, of course, likes are huge inside the organization, and those drive, along with comments, popular content. The next step in this whole road to product development is get it down. Oh, sorry, this isn't the next step. This is the current step. One thing one of the things about our organization that may be different from some of you guys is that we're very engineering heavy. And as a side effect of that, we find that code talks. So if you have a prototype of something, if you have a working thing that people can look at and use, that's going to be favored among the things that are just ideas, that are just images in someone's mind. If they're writing a Confluence page about it, that doesn't speak quite as loudly inside of Atlassian as someone who actually has something that's working. So we used to have a day where in 24 hours you're allowed to work on, we do have it still, but we can't call it what we used to. A day where you can work on whatever you want. You have to ship your product in 24 hours. That was a really strong way of people coming up with ideas and getting prototypes out. And we also have 20% time at Atlassian, and we're really big fans of allowing engineers to put their ideas into code so that we can see it working and see if it's a really great idea or if it's something we want to pause on for a while. So in getting it down, okay, the preview is not accurate in this case. So in getting it down, one of the things that I did in my 20% time was to prototype sortable tables. So we're thinking about getting this into Confluence 4.3, I believe. It's probably on the early access stuff. And I created a page that was sortable tables, just as the outcome of my spike. This is sort of along the lines of code talking. So this is just all that I wrote. But right immediately after posting this, I end up getting 35 comments. And this is how we collaborate using Confluence. And it's just a ton of comments. It's a ton of information. It's a lot to take in, but it's collaboration. It's me and my team hashing out how this is going to work and whether or not it's going to be a good idea. And we got several things out of this conversation that ended up going into the final release, and it's going to be what you guys see at the end of the day, as opposed to what I originally quickly, put together. So getting it down and hashing it out through the comments that you guys just saw have a lot of overlap, and that's the next thing that we're going into. So hashing it out is just the immediate outcome of getting it down for us. So comments, like, shares, mentions, and HipChat integration. As soon as you post an idea, everyone sees it in HipChat, and seconds later, you're hashing it out. Another thing with HipChat is in the comments you can see that whether or not someone is online, so you can, if you need to have just a brief chat with them, you can in HipChat. If it needs to be a longer form response, you can write that out in Confluence. A conversation that's worth having, that we've found that's worth having at least, is we have a very active internal Confluence instance. There's a lot of conversation, and occasionally that conversation gets really long-winded. And this is, for us, we've found, we have our own sort of internal look at this, and we say, oh, all this conversation is happening, and we're not, some of it's like, is it all constructive, right? And then we talk to our customers, and we find out that that's a really great problem to have. Having people super engaged and commenting and having a really active instance of Confluence is a really great thing to have going on. So are your flame wars effective? We think that they are, given the right culture. So we don't restrict commenting. We don't have any software or processes that are limiting those. It just sort of is an outcome of our culture. And of course, again, with popular content, we're seeing that the things that are getting likes and that are getting responses are driving popular content. So the important stuff tends to bubble. That's our experience, at least. Again, along with hashing it out, engineering culture, we found that finding a way to safely prototype is really key. So we have 20% time. We have days where developers are allowed to do whatever they want, and we have a really strong bent toward that because we heavily use our own software internally, but I think that it's a great sort of model for you guys to copy. Hopefully you can find a way to get your developers prototyping easily, whether it's dev instances or being able to quickly bring up an example version of the app with some data in it already. For us, we have Speakeasy, which is a great way for developers to just write a little bit of JavaScript to customize little things. And of course, when you're hashing things out, we think that comments are important over meetings. And coming back to that example earlier with sortable tables, we see here, again, we have two great founders. One of the founders comments on sortable tables. He's asking about whether or not things in comments, whether or not things in the editor need to be sorted. And at first I thought that was really important, and it would be just as important to all the users that in the editor they were able to sort things as when they were viewing the content. He comes along and says, actually, I've never wanted to do it in the editor. I just want to be able to sort content that I'm seeing on pages. You know, whenever someone posts sales figures or something, I want to be able to sort that by date as opposed to in the editor. So that ends up getting into the final version. Matt comes along, who is a peer of mine on the actual Confluence team, makes a comment about something else that needs to get in. And then he has another idea later on and says, oh, I found this a little unusual. Can we get it worked out? And that's this process where something goes from very early code, just very rough, to much more refined, much more user-friendly stuff. So from there, we move from getting it down and hashing it out to a phase where we're actually starting to get pictures that people can see. And this is mocking it up. So as I said, obviously a lot of design happens in Photoshop, but we're also seeing a lot of collaboration around that design happen inside of Confluence. So during our brief to wireframe, so earlier you have hash it out where you have a brief, you have discussion artifacts that designers can look at and find out why certain things are important. And now we're going from that brief into a wireframe. The tool that we're using for wireframing right now has a really great integration with Confluence. It's called Balsamic. It's a visual tool, but it's not so real that people are going to say, oh, I think that's off by 2 pixels. But it is real enough that people get a good concept of what things are going to look like in the end, or what they could potentially look like in the end. So here's an example of me using Balsamic to put together, I think I'm putting together a wireframe for likes inside of comments. So I'm just creating an area that is like the comments area, except it's got the profile picture, and then I'm going to add a like button just above that. And you can see, I don't know if you guys can see the detail, but from here, those lines along the top are not perfect. This box is clearly not perfect either, but it does provide you sort of a spatial representation of what things are going to look like in the end. So now we have that, and we're adding the comment area. And Balsamic has great little guides that you'll see come up to let you know where you probably want to position stuff to give solid white space. And in the end, I get something that I can put in front of people that looks something like what the finished product will look like, but doesn't have to look exactly like what they're going to see. And that's just me making it look great for the end product. And so here, this is inside the editor. It's a macro. It's displayed right there in line. And I can add whatever content I want above or below that. Do all the editing I would normally do, put it in front of people, and get back into that hashing it out, further iterations on your ideas sort of phase. And so this is a place where that design could have happened in Photoshop, but instead we've chosen to leverage the conversation that can come along with Confluence and do the initial mockups there. The initial wireframes there. We get into mockups, and those are actually true Photoshop files. And you're actually going to end up cutting those up. Some things that do end up in Confluence that are very design specific are styled guides, or some things that are useful for that actual design are style guides, where you have information about what a dialogue should look like, what a drop-down should look like across all of your products, and we try to do that inside of Atlassian because we have several different products. The discussion artifacts are really useful for designers. They're coming back and looking at what people talked about earlier and finding out why is this position for the like button better than this other position? Why is the profile picture there as opposed to somewhere else? And then, of course, our designers are checking in their stuff along the way to version control repositories, and being able to easily navigate those and view those and even search them is a really important facet of Fisheye and Stash. Next, we're getting into planning. So this process very heavily relies on Jira, but since we're talking about Confluence, I'll lean on the things where this planning phase does happen. Some of it does happen in Confluence, and what we pull for our Jira integration, how we make that effective inside of Confluence. So I've talked about how we have a really great reputation as a development shop, but we also have a really great reputation as an agile shop. And that's absolutely well-deserved, in my opinion, as someone who's a dev and works on the team day to day. But it's also important for us as an organization to note that we're not here to stand in front and say that we have it all figured out. Each team inside of Atlassian does a slightly different style of agile. The Confluence team that I work on is Kanban. There was a talk earlier today about how one of the teams had tried very prototypical Scrum, where they're doing physical cards for everything and planning everything out to a T, doing full estimations of everything. So we don't have this down to a science. We're here to learn from you guys, and we're here to hopefully teach you guys something, but we are polyglot. We don't do one particular style. And one of the great things about the Atlassian tools is they allow you to do sort of whatever your flavor is. So the tools of the trade for planning it are obviously Jira and Greenhopper, but we do use integrations for Jira, for doing things like Jira issue macros, and we'll have boards that will say for all of 4.2, here's what the plan looks like, here's how things are going and tracking with colors, and we'll see that in a bit. We use team calendars to map out long-term vision for stuff, and if you want to see how we're using those in combination, you can go to atlassian.com/resources/better-together. And we have, for any given product, you can drag a drop down and pick it, and pick another product that you want to find out about and see how those work together. So here is that planning in a Greenhopper rapid board. And this is, I think this is things just before I left. So you can see that I have 2 issues in progress, which is really odd because I'm in the US right now. Build it. So now that we're building things, how are we tracking doneness? How are we seeing how the process is moving along? For micro level things, so individual tasks and things that are very consumable on a small time frame, are usually tracked inside of Jira. So that board that we just saw were things that I can get done in a period of 24 hours to a week. And then for macro level things, so long-term plan, all of 4.2, all of 4.3, how is that tracking? Those things are kept inside of Confluence, pulling data from Jira through Jira issue macros or Jira queries into a page inside of Confluence to show to outside stakeholders or to people on the team, how is that tracking along? You know, is it green, is it red? How is this individual thing doing, or how is this long-term plan coming along? So here's an example of that page for, this is actually, I think this is a picture of 4.2, because I went to for 4.3. So 4.2 is already shipped, and I went to that page, and everything was green. Very boring, because everything was complete. This is actually 4.3. So you can see that the top couple of things, the really important bits, are already done and they're green, but the bottom bits are either red or yellow, and they're coming along, and hopefully they'll get in, but maybe they'll slip, maybe they'll go into 4.4. But we're tracking overall doneness, we're tracking macro level completeness through Confluence. And obviously there will be a discussion that will be had along the way about, oh, I thought that was going to be in 4.4 all along, or what about this other thing that I actually got done during a 20% time, can we slip it in? Yes, we can, put it in the board, make it green, that kind of stuff. There's also some extra sprint work that comes along all the time. So you're having a retrospective of a sprint, and you have some tasks that you want to get done, or you think this person who maybe is not so technical but is still a member of the team, so a QA person or one of the PMs, they have this thing that we need them to, like something that we need to see out of them by the end of a sprint. And we use inline tasks for those. I think someone has talked about that at this point. So things like sprint goals, action items from a meeting, anything for non-technical users. And those things end up going into Confluence notifications. So the way that you create an inline task is just by a UI element in the toolbar. And then whenever you create a task for someone, they end up in the Confluence notifications bar. A great thing about the notification stuff that we're announcing is, for me in particular, I hope other people are like this, but maybe it's just me being weird, is that I'm able to turn off a lot of the notifications in Confluence and a lot of the email notifications and just get them in Confluence. So when I switch from I'm doing email now to I'm doing Confluence specific stuff, I get my Confluence specific notifications. And if I just need to check my inbox for something really quickly while I'm writing some code, some suggestion that a developer sent me a couple of days ago, I can go into my inbox and not get distracted by having 4 notifications. I can context switch from email to Confluence stuff, from Confluence stuff on to dev, and know inside of Confluence what things need to be done, what things need to be read, and if anything needs to get done later, I can star it, I can check things off when they're done, and it's really helped me with my workflow. So here's an example of inline task getting turned into task inside of the notification center. And obviously you can assign tasks using at mentions as well, which is a really great feature. So now we've gone from getting stuff down, hashing it out, we've gone through the design phase, we've gone through build it. Again, a lot of that happens outside of Confluence. I hope you can see where we're leveraging Confluence during that process, though. And now we're aligning. So we're getting everyone on the same picture. So one way that we do that is using Confluence boxes. And these allow us to bring everyone onto a centralized message so we can see what is being messaged about this release externally. And we can also keep people aware internally who may not be as close to the Confluence team as the rest of us are. So, and it forces the Confluence team itself to say, oh, I worked on this very back-end heavy feature, but now I can see on the Confluence box they're not talking about that so much. It's going to be great for users, it's going to be great for the ecosystem, but what we're actually putting in front of users. So just like companies like Adobe, game developers, and operating system makers have physical boxes they ship to people, we actually produce physical boxes internally for Confluence. And this is an example of one. So you can see that we have sort of one main idea that we're pushing for a release, and then we have 3 smaller areas where we're saying what in particular, what small features are really great, and what things are you going to really love about this release. So in particular for 4.2, obviously we were really pushing likes, what's popular, and page layouts. So as a sort of summary, for Dream It, we're talking about getting ideas down, hashing them out, and sort of recognizing that high engagement through Confluence is not a bad thing, but that's a really positive thing to have going on. For Planet, we're capturing macro-level doneness inside of Confluence, and we're tracking micro-level tasks, small consumable stuff inside of Jira. For Build It, we're using primarily Jira, but we're also keeping track of that same sort of doneness and keeping track of how people are tracking on a larger scale through Confluence. And then for Launch, we're getting everyone on the same feature using boxes. And I believe that is my last slide.